What if the single biggest factor determining how long you live has nothing to do with what you eat, how much you exercise, or even your genetics? What if the answer has been hiding in plain sight, sitting quietly between your ears, shaping every heartbeat, every breath, every year you either gain or lose? Today we are going to talk about something that most longevity conversations completely ignore, and by the end of this video, you are going to understand why your mental health might be the most important investment you ever make in your life. Let me start with something that will probably feel uncomfortable. People with serious, untreated mental health conditions die, on average, somewhere between 10 and 20 years earlier than people without those conditions. Read that again. Not a year or two. A decade or more. That is not a statistic buried in some obscure journal. That is a pattern researchers have been observing across countries, across cultures, across different populations. And it does not just apply to the most severe diagnoses. Chronic stress, persistent anxiety, long-term loneliness, untreated depression, all of these states quietly wear down your biology in ways that eventually show up as physical illness, cardiovascular disease, weakened immunity, accelerated cellular aging. Because I think when most people hear that mental health affects longevity, they assume it is mostly behavioral. Like, depressed people do not exercise. Anxious people eat badly. And yes, those behavioral factors absolutely play a role. But the science goes much deeper than that, and this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Your mind and your body are not separate systems. They are one integrated network, constantly sending signals back and forth. When you experience chronic psychological stress, your body releases cortisol and other stress hormones in prolonged, sustained bursts. And when cortisol stays elevated over long periods of time, it starts doing damage. It promotes inflammation throughout the body. There is also something called telomere length, which is one of the most fascinating markers researchers study when looking at biological aging. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes, kind of like the plastic tips on shoelaces that keep them from fraying. Every time your cells divide, those telomeres get slightly shorter. And when they get too short, cells stop dividing properly, which is essentially the biological definition of aging at the cellular level. Here is the remarkable part. If you want to live longer, you cannot outsource that to a supplement stack or a perfect diet while ignoring chronic stress, isolation, or unaddressed depression. The whole system matters. You matter, as a whole person. And maybe the most important reframe here is that taking care of your mental health is not separate from taking care of your health. It is the foundation everything else is built on. The decades you are hoping to add at the end might actually depend most on what you do for your mind starting right now. Now let me shift gears because I do not want this to feel like a lecture about everything that can go wrong. I want to talk about what goes right, because this is actually where the most exciting research lives. If negative mental states can accelerate aging, then positive mental states and good psychological well-being can do the opposite. And the evidence here is genuinely inspiring. Studies following large populations over decades have found that people with higher levels of optimism tend to live significantly longer. We are talking about substantial differences, not trivial ones. One major study found that the most optimistic individuals had an 11 to 15% longer lifespan compared to the least optimistic group, and were significantly more likely to reach age 85. That is an enormous effect for something we rarely talk about in conversations about longevity. Another massive factor. People who report having a strong sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, something that feels meaningful to them, consistently show better health outcomes and longer lives. This has been observed across different cultural contexts, different age groups, and different ways of measuring purpose. The mechanism seems to involve multiple pathways simultaneously. Purpose reduces stress reactivity, it promotes healthier behaviors, it influences social connection, and it appears to have direct neurobiological effects that promote resilience. Your sense that your life matters is actually keeping you alive longer. That is one of the most profound things I have encountered in this research. Social connection deserves its own conversation because it is consistently underestimated as a health factor. Loneliness is now recognized by researchers as a genuine public health crisis, and the mortality risk associated with chronic loneliness is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that land for a moment. We spend enormous amounts of energy and money trying to get people to quit smoking, and almost no equivalent effort helping people build genuine social bonds. The quality of your relationships, the feeling that you are known, seen, and connected to others, this profoundly influences your health at every level. Part of why this matters so much biologically comes back to our evolutionary history. Humans are deeply social animals. For most of our existence as a species, being separated from your group was genuinely life-threatening. Your nervous system evolved to treat isolation as an emergency signal, triggering stress responses that were designed to motivate you to reconnect. In the modern world, chronic loneliness means your nervous system is essentially stuck in a low-grade emergency state, and that chronic activation takes a serious toll over time. So what do we actually do with all of this? Because information without direction is just anxiety-inducing, and we have established that anxiety is not great for your lifespan. Let me give you the things that the research points to most consistently. The first is sleep, and I want you to reconsider how you think about it. Sleep is not a passive recovery period. It is when your brain literally cleans itself, flushing out metabolic waste products that build up during waking hours, including proteins associated with neurodegenerative disease. Prioritizing sleep is simultaneously one of the most powerful mental health interventions and one of the most powerful anti-aging strategies available to you. If you are cutting sleep to get more done, you are making a trade that the biology simply does not support. The second is movement, and not necessarily the aggressive, performance-focused kind. Regular moderate physical activity has profound effects on mental health through multiple pathways. It reduces inflammation, it promotes neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to grow and adapt, it releases endorphins and other mood-regulating neurochemicals, and it improves sleep quality. Even 30 minutes of brisk walking several times a week produces measurable positive changes in brain structure and function over time. Movement is essentially free therapy with longevity benefits built in. The third is your relationship with rumination, which is the mental habit of repeatedly cycling through negative thoughts, replaying difficult memories, catastrophizing about the future. This pattern of thinking is one of the most consistent predictors of depression and anxiety, and it has real physiological consequences. Learning to interrupt rumination cycles, whether through mindfulness practices, structured problem solving, behavioral activation, or working with a therapist, is genuinely one of the most high-return investments you can make in your long-term health. And the fifth, which might surprise you, is meaning-making. Not just having purpose, but actively engaging with the question of what matters to you and why. Research suggests that people who regularly reflect on their values and what gives their life meaning show more psychological resilience, better stress responses, and better health outcomes over time. This can look like journaling, like meaningful conversations, like therapy, like contemplative practice. The specific form matters less than the genuine engagement. I want to come back to where we started, because I think there is something important here about how we think about health itself. For a long time, both in medicine and in popular culture, we drew a fairly sharp line between mental health and physical health. Mental health was somehow less real, less medical, more in the realm of willpower and attitude. The science has completely dismantled that distinction. Your psychological state is a biological state. Your emotional life is running on and shaping your physical body every single day. If you want to live longer, you cannot outsource that to a supplement stack or a perfect diet while ignoring chronic stress, isolation, or unaddressed depression. The whole system matters. You matter, as a whole person. And maybe the most important reframe here is that taking care of your mental health is not separate from taking care of your health. It is the foundation everything else is built on. The decades you are hoping to add at the end might actually depend most on what you do for your mind starting right now.